Before you swipe away, imagine a single Washington quarter sitting in your pocket, worth more than a luxury car, more than a house down payment, more than most people will ever save in their lifetime. This is not a myth, this is real US coin history. Hidden in plain sight, and the craziest part, millions of people have handled these quarters without ever knowing what they touch. Today you are about to see the top 5 most valuable Washington quarter dollar coins ever found. Coins born from war, mistakes, minting errors, and historic shortages. Coins so rare collectors chase them for decades, and yes, some of these quarters are still undiscovered. Imagine holding a coin that was born in a year when the United States Mint was undergoing one of the most challenging phases in modern numismatic history, a year when America wrestled with economic pressures, metal shortages, quality control issues, and shifting national priorities, and through it all a seemingly ordinary 25-cent piece emerged to become one of the most discussed, most studied, and most surprising coins in modern American coinage. And that coin is the 1983 Washington quarter, a coin that at first glance looks like a simple everyday piece of change, but once you understand what happened in 1983, you realize this coin carries a story packed with mystery, unexpected rarity, historical drama, national significance. A story that stretches from the early days of George Washington's legacy to the depths of the minting crisis in the early 1980s to the astonishing discoveries made by collectors decades later. And today we are going to dive deep into the incredible world behind this quarter, a coin that many people overlooked as pocket change, but that now stands as a key to understanding one of the most overlooked but critical periods in US mint history. And by the time you finish this journey, you will never look at a 1983 quarter the same way again, because its story begins long before 1983, long before copper-nickel coinage, long before the modern minting era. It begins almost 250 years ago, with the birth of George Washington himself, whose face would eventually become one of the most recognized portraits in the history of American coinage. And when the Washington quarter was introduced in 1932, it was not originally meant to become a permanent circulating coin, but simply a commemorative design, marking the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. Yet the design created by sculptor John Flanagan captured the nation's admiration so strongly that it was adopted for ongoing circulation, and thus began a long lineage of Washington quarters spanning the Silver Era, the Silver-Copper transition, the Bicentennial celebration, and eventually the turbulent years of the early 1980s. That turbulence is what brings us directly to the year 1983, a pivotal turning point when the United States Mint faced extraordinary challenges due to coin shortages nationwide, along with the lingering aftershocks of the 1980 copper penny changeover. The nation was still adapting to the widespread shift toward base metal coinage, and in 1983, Mint was under immense pressure to produce huge quantities of coins quickly, especially quarters, which were in high demand for commerce, vending machines, and daily transactions. But speed came at a cost. The Mint's quality control struggled during this period, leading to weak strikes, alignment issues, metal inconsistencies, and a variety of production anomalies that collectors would only truly come to understand decades later. The 1983 quarter became a symbol of that struggle, and because the Mint did not release uncirculated mint sets in 1982 or 1983, something that had never happened before in the modern era, almost every 1983 quarter released went directly into circulation and was used heavily across the country, wearing down quickly and making high-grade examples extremely scarce for collectors in later years. This unexpected scarcity turned the 1983 Washington quarter from a common coin into a modern rarity, especially in mint state grades, and that rarity became even more astonishing when researchers discovered one of the most famous minting errors in modern coin history. The 1983 quarter struck on a copper Washington quarter plankett that was never intended for this year. This happened because leftover transitional metal stock interacted with standard plankett batches, something deeply tied to the metal inventory complications of the early 1980s, and this unexpected discovery stunned the numismatic world. sparking renewed interest in the entire coinage of that period. But beyond the errors and the lack of mint sets, the 1983 quarter also carries historical importance because it captures the state of American design, evolution, the mint's operational struggles, and the broader story of how inflation and economic pressures reshaped circulating coinage during the Reagan era. And when you examine the design of the 1983 quarter, the portrait of Washington still carries the classic features. Sculpted in 1932, though by this time the dies were aging, and inconsistencies appeared frequently, leading to some coins showing weak details in Washington's hair, flattened rims, and variable clarity in the lettering on the reverse side. The eagle perched proudly on its bundle of arrows remains a testament to American strength, although the 1983 dies often show weakness in the eagle's wings and breast feathers, reflecting the intense production demands placed on the mint that year. The Philadelphia Mint in 1983 produced no mint mark for its quarters, continuing the tradition of pre-1980s Philadelphia circulation coinage, while Denver used the D mint mark, and because both mints were operating under intense pressure, their output created fascinating variations in strike sharpness, metal flow, and where patterns. Collectors today carefully study these differences to understand how the national coin shortage influenced production techniques during this year. And as we dive deeper into the historical backdrop, it becomes clear that the 1983 quarter sits at the crossroads of technological change, economic stress, and evolving minting philosophy. The early 1980s saw a shift in national coinage strategy as the United States Mint adjusted its machinery, die usage, and metal sourcing to keep up with economic demands and inflation faced by the country. The minting process for 1983 quarters relied heavily on high-speed striking, which often led to die fatigue, causing a wide range of die cracks, cuts, misaligned strikes, and broad-struck errors, which have now become prized collector pieces. And then there is the market history of the 1983 quarter, which experienced a dramatic rise in collector interest when numismatists realized that because of the absence of government-issued mint sets, extremely few untouched specimens existed, leading to an explosion in submissions to grading services decades after the coins were produced. This sparked a new wave of research into the minting practices of 1982 and 1983 and helped cement the 1983 quarter is a modern numismatic treasure with a backstory unlike any other circulating coin from the era. And through all of this, the coin itself remains a powerful storyteller of American history, reminding us that behind every small piece of metal in our pockets lies a story of national identity, presidential legacy, technological evolution, and economic struggle. And so as we explore the 1983 Washington quarter, from its historical origins to the intense pressure faced by the U.S. Mint, to the errors that would shock the numismatic world, to the rarity of high-grade examples, we uncover not just a coin but a portrait of America in transition, a moment frozen in time, and a symbol of the dynamic forces that shaped modern coinage. And with that, this script opens the door to our journey into the world of the 1983 Washington quarter, where every detail, every minting decision, every historical context, and every unexpected rarity helps us understand why this coin stands as one of the most intriguing pieces ever struck in modern United States history. Imagine holding a piece of American history that passed silently through millions of hands, yet carries a story far deeper than the simple 25 cents stamped upon it. The 1988 Washington quarter is one of those everyday coins that most people overlook, yet it represents a bridge between the rich tradition of early 20th century American coinage and the modern era of minting technology and national change. And as we begin this journey into the complete professional history of 1988 Washington quarter, you will discover how a simple coin found in pockets, drawers, jars, and register trays across the nation became a symbolic reflection of America itself. A nation defined by ambition, resilience, and continuous transformation. And to understand the significance of the 1988 Washington quarter, we must travel back to the roots of the Washington quarter series, which began in 1932 when the United States sought a design to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and instead of choosing an allegorical figure or symbolic representation as done previously on many coins, the nation looked to honor its founding father, directly selecting sculptor John Flanagan's now iconic portrait of Washington, a design that would become one of the longest-running and most recognized images in American coinage history. And by the time we reach 1988, the Washington quarter had already been in circulation for more than 55 years, surviving world wars, economic shifts, multiple political eras, and sweeping cultural change, making each coin from this period a snapshot of a nation. Continuing to evolve, the year 1988 in particular sits at an important crossroads in American history. The final stretch of the Cold War, the rise of new technology and media, changing industries, and a national economy finding its footing after years of challenges, all while the U.S. Mint continued refining and improving its coin production methods, and the 1988 Washington quarter reflects all of this embedded within its metal and design. The 1988 quarter was struck at two mints, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, with Philadelphia producing far more coins than Denver, and each mint producing quarters with different mint marks, or in the case of Philadelphia that year, no mint mark at all, and the Philadelphia Mint created hundreds of millions of 1988 quarters, filling the channels of commerce throughout the eastern and central United States, while the Denver Mint supplied the western and southwestern regions. But what makes the 1988 quarter especially interesting to collectors, historians, and numismatists is not only its massive mintage, but its place in the timeline of American minting, because it is one of the final years before the United States Mint began its major modernization efforts, and before the explosive popularity of the state quarter program, which began in 1999 and completely transformed American coin collecting fervor. And so the 1988 Washington quarter exists today in a unique position. It is common and familiar, but also increasingly appreciated as a piece of pre-modern mint history, representing the last era of traditional minting, where coins were struck using older technology and fewer security considerations than we see today. And when we examine the design, we take note of Flanagan's profile portrait of George Washington facing left, with his hair tied back in the classic 18th century style, and above his head is the word liberty, while to the left of his neck appears the motto "In God We Trust," and beneath it the date 1988, marking its place in time. And each of these elements is deliberate, crafted to honor Washington, while keeping the coin simple, clear, and instantly recognizable. And on the reverse we find the majestic heraldic eagle with outstretched wings grasping a bundle of arrows, symbolizing strength, readiness, and national defense, while below it an olive branch reaches upwards, symbolizing America's commitment to peace. And together these symbols present a balanced message of strength and diplomacy that defined the United States through much of its 20th century identity. And this reverse design would remain on U.S. quarters until 1998, making the 1988 issue one of the last decades of quarters to feature the classic eagle before the introduction of the state quarter program. And when we dive deeper into the minting process of 1988, we uncover the realities of American coin production at the time, as the U.S. Mint was transitioning into a new era of precision and improved quality control, yet still dealing with the limitations of older equipment. And this is why on 1988 quarters we sometimes find striking variations, slight imperfections, plankett issues, or die fatigue defects that occurred as dies were used for long periods to meet the massive national demand for coinage. And some collectors search for these varieties because they reveal the mechanical challenges faced in the minting process of the late 1980s. And although 1988 quarters were minted in huge numbers, the condition of surviving specimens varies greatly. Coins that entered circulation often show heavy wear due to decades of use, while the few uncirculated examples preserved in mint sets or rolls provide a glimpse into what these coins looked like the day they left the mint. And for collectors, the grade of a 1988 Washington quarter plays a major role in its value, with high grade Examples, especially those graded mint state 65, mint state 66, or exceptionally mint state 67, being far scarcer than their mass production would suggest. And this scarcity arises from the nature of circulation and storage, because most people never thought to save 1988 quarters, since they were modern, familiar, and abundant, meaning nearly all of them were spent, used, and worn, leaving very few pristine examples to survive. Into the collector market decades later. As we move further into the story, we begin to see the cultural role of the 1988 quarter not just as a piece of currency, but as a marker of life in the United States during the late 1980s. As a period defined by economic recovery after the recession of the early 80s, a booming stock market, the rise of household electronics, personal computers, and video game consoles, and an America that was shifting socially, politically, and technologically. Yet through all of this constant change, the Washington quarter remains steady, unchanged, dependable, and consistent in the pockets of millions, representing a sense of continuity and familiarity in a rapidly evolving world. And when we explore the distribution of these coins, we find that they traveled widely throughout the economy, from small local businesses to interstate commerce, from vending machines and payphones to banks and federal institutions, and the quarter was one of the most used denominations, meaning 1988 quarters were worn down quickly from heavy use, but this also means each quarter carries the physical evidence of American daily life, from the scratches made by keys and metal counters to the smoothness caused by years of friction inside pockets, purses, and cash drawers. And for viewers who enjoy the deeper historical meaning behind coins, the 1988 Washington quarter serves as a powerful reminder that common objects can carry uncommon stories. Each coin a silent witness to countless interactions, exchanges, and transactions, reflecting the movement of people, goods, and ideas across the nation. And as we continue unfolding this lengthy 2-hour exploration into its history, we examine the larger economic factors that influenced coin production during 1988, including inflation, interest rates, national spending, and the mint's responsibility to maintain a stable supply of coinage to ensure economic fluidity. And the quarter in particular played a vital role, because its value was high enough to be useful, yet low enough to be used constantly and frequently. And the mint's responsibility during this period was tremendous, because millions of businesses relied on a consistent supply of coins for daily operation, meaning the production of quarters was not only an economic necessity, but a logistical feat that required coordination, precision, and adaptation to market demands. And while 1988 quarters may seem ordinary, they are in fact the product of a vast industrial system involving design, metal procurement, blanket preparation, die engraving, high-pressure striking, inspection, packaging, storage, transportation, and national distribution, all operating in sync to ensure that every American could access the currency needed for everyday life. And as we continue expanding on the depth of this history, we look at how the 1988 quarter interacts with the broader narrative of the Washington quarter series, which spans from 1932 to 1998, a period that includes changes in metal composition, shifts in design, updates in minting technology, and evolving national priorities. And while earlier quarters were made of 90% silver, the 1988 quarter belongs to the clad era, introduced in 1965, when silver was removed from circulating quarters due to rising silver prices, economic pressure, and the need for more cost-effective materials. And this clad composition of copper-nickel bonded to a pure copper core became the standard for all circulating quarters. And the 1988 issue continues this tradition, reflecting the economic realities of the mid to late 20th century, and the durability of clad metal allowed these coins to withstand decades of circulation, making many 1988 quarters still common today, although heavily worn and carrying the marks of time. And with the evolution of minting machinery during this period, the strikes on 1988 quarters vary in sharpness, detail, and clarity depending on die condition, press calibration, blanket quality, and mint workload, offering collectors a wide range of examples to study and analyze for subtle differences, and some numismatists focus on die varieties such as doubled dies, misaligned dies, rotated dies, die chips. Imagine holding a simple quarter in your hand and realizing it has quietly witnessed the end of an era, the rise of a new world economy, and the final heartbeat of the Cold War. The 1989 Washington quarter is not just pocket change, it is a metal time capsule struck at the exact moment when history changed forever, and today we are going to peel back every layer of that story, from the face of George Washington to the machines that struck it, the people who spent it, the collectors who hunt it, and the hidden value that still waits to be discovered in plain sight. This is the full professional deep dive into the 1989 Washington quarter, coin born in a year when the Berlin Wall fell, when technology reshaped daily life, and when the United States Mint quietly produced hundreds of millions of quarters that would flow through gas stations, grocery stores, and payphones across America while carrying a legacy most people never notice. The Washington quarter design itself already carried more than 50 years of history. By 1989, first introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, the obverse portrait by sculptor John Flanagan had become one of the most recognizable images in American money, a calm, powerful profile of the first president facing left, symbolizing leadership, restraint, and permanence. And by the time 1989 arrived, this design had survived war, inflation, silver removal, and massive economic change without being replaced. The reverse of the coin still showed the proud American eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows flanked by olive branches, a clear symbol of strength, and pieced together a design that reflected the balance of power and diplomacy that defined the United States at the close of the 20th century. In 1989, these quarters were struck in 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with Philadelphia and Denver producing coins for everyday circulation, while San Francisco focused on proof coins specially made for collectors, with sharper strikes, mirror-like fields, and frosted details intended to showcase the design at its best. All 1989 Washington quarters were struck in the modern clad composition introduced in 1965, consisting of an outer layer of copper nickel bonded to a pure copper core, a change that marked the end of circulating silver coinage and reflected rising metal prices and economic realities. Each coin weighed approximately 5 2/3 grams, measured about 24 millimeters across, and carried areted edge details that seem technical but matter deeply to collectors and historians alike because they define authenticity and condition. The mintage numbers for 1989 tell powerful story of scale and necessity, with Philadelphia producing over 500 million quarters and Denver striking well over 800 million, making 1989 one of the high production years needed to support a growing economy fueled by consumer spending, suburban expansion, and constant daily transactions. These coins moved endlessly from hand to hand through cash registers, vending machines, toll booths, and laundry rooms, rarely stopping long enough for anyone to consider their origin. Meanwhile, San Francisco produced a much smaller number of proof quarters sold directly to collectors as part of proof sets, which today remain some of the sharpest and most visually stunning examples of the 1989 issue. By itself, the 1989 Washington quarter is not rare in average condition, and that is precisely what makes it fascinating, because rarity is not always about low mintage but about survival, quality, and errors over time. Most of these quarters were worn down by decades of use, losing sharp details on Washington's hair, the eagle feathers, and the high points of the design, but a small percentage survived in uncirculated condition, protected in roll sets or collections. And these coins can command premiums far above face value, especially when graded by professional services in high mint state levels. The true excitement, however, comes from errors and varieties, because within those hundreds of millions of strikes, mistakes were inevitable. Off-center strikes, double dies, clipped plankets, broad strikes, and misaligned dies all slipped through quality control and escaped into circulation, creating hidden treasures that collectors still search for today. a dramatic off-center 1989 quarter, or a strong doubled. The example can be worth many times its face value depending on severity and condition, turning an ordinary coin into a collector's prize. The proof versions struck in San Francisco also have their own appeal, especially deep cameo examples where the contrast between frosted devices and mirrored fields is bold and eye-catching. These coins represent the mint at its technical best and serve as reference points for how the design was intended to look beyond the metal and mechanics. The 1989 Washington quarter reflects the cultural and economic atmosphere of its time. It circulated during the final years before state quarters would revolutionize coin collecting in America. It represents the last full decade of the classic eagle reverse, before design changes began to reshape modern U.S. coinage, and it passed through the hands of people living through historic moments, from the fall of communism in Eastern Europe to the dawn of the digital age in the United States. Every scratch and worn edge tells a story of movement, commerce, and daily life, making even the most common example a physical link to the past for collectors. The 1989 Washington quarter offers multiple paths of interest, whether assembling a complete date and mint set, hunting for high-grade survivors, chasing errors, or appreciating proof craftsmanship. And for new collectors, it serves as a reminder that valuable history does not always look valuable at first glance. It can be sitting in a jar drawer or pocket waiting to be understood. This is why the 1989 Washington quarter matters, not because it is rare, but because it is real, accessible, and deeply connected to American history. And by the end of this journey, you will never look at a simple quarter the same way again. Imagine holding a 1991 Washington quarter in your hand, a coin that seems ordinary to the untrained eye, yet carries with it a powerful story woven through decades of American history and craftsmanship. And as we explore its journey from the drawing boards of the United States Mint to the pockets, purses, and collections of millions, you begin to understand how this single 25-cent piece reflects far more than its face value. Because the 1991 Washington quarter stands at a unique point in time, bridging the traditional artistry that shaped the earlier decades of American coinage and the rising technological precision that would define the minting world of the coming era. And to truly understand its significance, we must travel back to the origins of the Washington quarter itself, which began in 1932 during the nationwide celebration of George Washington's 200th birthday, when the United States sought to honor the first president with a new circulating coin that would capture the spirit of a nation still growing, recovering, and evolving. And that original design, created by sculptor John Flanagan, would remain on the coin for more than 6 decades, making it one of the most recognizable and longest-running coin designs in U.S. history. And by the time 1991 arrived, the Washington quarter had already survived wartime silver shortages, shifts in economic policy, and changes in public taste. Yet it remained untouched, still carrying the familiar portrait of Washington on the obverse and the proud American eagle on the reverse, symbols of continuity, trust, and national identity. And the 1991 issue emerges as part of a period when the United States Mint had fully transitioned away from the silver coinage of earlier decades, opting instead for the copper nickel-clad composition that had become standard since the mid-1960s, a composition chosen not just for cost-effectiveness, but also for durability, strength, and the ability to withstand the immense pressure and speed of modern minting machinery. And as the Denver and Philadelphia mints continued producing millions of quarters each year, 1991 marked a reaffirmation of American minting expertise, where precision die engraving, quality control, and mass production had become highly refined art forms in themselves, with each quarter struck to withstand years of circulation, exposure, and human handling. And when we look closer at the 1991 quarter, we begin to uncover a deeper story, one tied to economic trends, public spending habits, and the broader cultural landscape of early 1990s America, a time when the nation stood between the Cold War era and the rapidly approaching technological revolution, a moment defined by shifting Political priorities, new forms of entertainment, and the early rise of digital communication, and the coins themselves became small but meaningful time capsules, silently recording the rhythms of everyday American life, from vending machines to toll booths, from lunch counters to gas stations, from childhood piggy banks to the cash registers of bustling city stores. And the 1991 quarter plays a role in numismatic history as well, because collectors value it as part of the final years before the grand transformation of the Washington Quarter series that would arrive at the end of the decade, when the state quarters program reshaped the hobby forever, making earlier dates like 1991 symbolic of the last chapter of the original uninterrupted design era. And as we delve deeper into die varieties, mint set production, uncirculated strikes, and the subtle differences between the Philadelphia and Denver outputs of that year, you see how even a common circulation coin can become a fascinating subject of study for collectors, historians, and enthusiasts who understand that every mint mark, every strike characteristic, and every production decision reveals another layer of the coin's story. And this is where the narrative expands into the mechanical world of the United States Mint, exploring how massive presses operated, how dies were engraved and replaced, how plankets were prepared, inspected, and fed into machines, and how the distinctive reeded edges were formed, a process rooted in centuries-old traditions yet executed with modern efficiency. And when you examine a 1991 quarter today, you are not simply looking at a piece of metal, but at a representation of a nation in transition, standing on the threshold of a new era, yet still carrying its heritage with pride. And that is why this coin becomes the perfect subject for an in-depth 2-hour documentary, because its creation, distribution, cultural relevance, and historical context form a continuous thread stretching across multiple decades, showing how American currency is not just an economic tool, but a living reflection of the nation itself, evolving, adapting, enduring, and reminding us of the stories etched into every detail of its design. And as we journey through the political climate of the early 90s, the minting techniques of the era, the legacy of the Washington Quarter, and the precise events that shaped the 1991 release, we uncover a dynamic narrative filled with craftsmanship, history, economics, symbolism, and national identity, all anchored by this one coin that has passed through countless hands over the years, leaving behind a trail of memories, transactions, and unspoken stories that together paint a portrait of America at a fascinating moment in its timeline. And by the end of this exploration, viewers will not only understand the 1991 Washington Quarter itself, but also the immense world behind it, the decisions, the artistry, the traditions, and the legacy that continues to make it a cherished piece of American numismatic history. The story of the 1995 Washington Quarter begins at a crossroads in American coinage history, a moment shaped by tradition, modern craftsmanship, and the silent evolution of the United States Mint. And when collectors hold a 1995 quarter in their hand, they are holding far more than a simple piece of circulating currency. They are holding a symbol of national change, a continuation of a legacy that began in 1932. And a snapshot of the American economy during a decade defined by growth, innovation, and new expectations. And to understand the full depth of this coin, you must journey back to the roots of the Washington Quarter itself, because the 1995 issue does not exist in isolation. It exists as a living timeline carved in metal and carried through the hands of millions of people across the country, from grocery store transactions to federal mint bags to coin rolls tucked away in drawers. The 1995 quarter tells a story that begins more than 60 years before its release and rises into a decade where the U.S. Mint prepared for one of the largest coinage transitions in American history. The Washington Quarter first emerged in 1930 created to commemorate the 200th birthday of George Washington and sculpted by John Flanagan. After a long and debated design competition, the coin was never meant to be permanent, but its classic federal style and national symbolism resonated deeply with Americans, so it remained in production year after year with only minor updates. And by the time the 1990s arrived, the Washington Quarter had become one of the most recognizable and heavily produced denominations in the nation, circulating across every state and territory. and embedded in the daily economy of over 200 million people, and yet the version minted in 1995 carries a specific importance because it was one of the final years before the dramatic redesign that would begin in 1999. With the launch of the famous State Quarters program, an event that transformed U.S. coin collecting and brought millions of new collectors into the hobby, 1995 Washington Quarter was struck at 3 facilities: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, each playing a unique role in distribution, circulation, and collectible production, and the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of these coins without a mint mark, continuing its long tradition as the workhorse of American circulation coinage. And the Denver Mint placed its iconic D Mint mark on its own large output, contributing heavily to Western distribution and offering collectors subtle variations in strike quality, metal flow, and die use. And then the San Francisco Mint crafted proof versions, both clad and silver, for collectors, producing mirror-like strikes, sharp details, and deep cameo contrasts that reveal the artistry of Flanagan's original design in a way that everyday circulating pieces rarely show. The economic climate of the mid-1990s had a direct influence on coin production levels across all denominations, and in 1995, the U.S. Mint responded to a flourishing economy and growing national population with strong mintages, creating a plentiful supply of quarters to fuel commerce across the country. And as electronic payment systems gradually grew, the physical quarter still held its essential role in vending machines, parking meters, telephone booths, arcade games, laundromats, and countless cash transactions. And because of this constant demand, the 1995 quarter saw widespread circulation and high production, making it one of the defining coinage outputs of its decade. However, mintage numbers alone do not reveal the full story, because the 1995 quarter includes specific die variations, strike differences, and proof qualities that attract collectors seeking sharp visuals, rare anomalies, and examples preserved in high mint state grades. And among the most prized pieces are those graded MS66 and above, due to the difficulty of finding pristine coins from heavy circulation years, and proof versions with deep cameo surfaces and flawless fields are also sought after for their beauty, craftsmanship, and limited production. To explore the history of this coin fully, you must also step into the world of the U.S. Mint's technological evolution, because during the mid-1990s, the Mint was preparing for large-scale improvements in die production, metal quality, and strike precision innovations that would soon support the enormous 50 State Quarters initiative. And the 1995 quarter stands at that important turning point, representing the final stage of traditional Washington quarter design before modernized processes reshaped its future. And from the alloy composition of copper nickel clad to the finishing techniques used for proof strikes, the 1995 quarter shows the blend of old and new methods that define this era in minting history. The verse kept a classic portrait of George Washington with subtle refinements that sharpened hair detail and rim alignment while maintaining the integrity of Flanagan's original sculpture, and the reverse displayed the iconic American eagle spreading its wings, perched confidently on a bundle of arrows framed by olive branches, symbolizing the strength and peace of the nation. And this image had represented the United States for decades as the country transitioned through wars, economic shifts, political changes, and cultural evolution. The 1995 Washington quarter also reflects a unique moment when the numismatic community recognized that the coin's long-standing design was approaching its end, and as collectors anticipated future changes, they began to preserve examples of late 1990s quarters, prompting increased interest in high-grade circulated and uncirculated sets. And the 1995 issue became part of this growing collector awareness, marking it as a memorable and historically significant entry within a long-running series. But beyond mintage counts, strikes, mint marks, and design variations, the true story of the 1995 Washington quarter lies in the hands through which it passed, the millions of pockets it rattled, and the store counters it touched, and the human experiences it quietly accompanied as every quarter Minted in 1995 became both a tool of daily life and a symbol of national continuity, whether used to buy a newspaper tossed into a charity bucket traded at a roadside fruit stand, or collected in a shiny proof set. The coin became part of American motion and everyday history. When you follow that motion, you see how the 1995 quarter traveled through cities, farms, schools, highways, gas stations, malls, stadiums, airports, military bases, and communities. From coast to coast, each coin carrying invisible stories of the era, stories told not through words but through wear marks, metal tones, circulation, fingerprints, and the soft fading of luster over time. And these movements reflect the broader cultural moment of the mid-1990s, when American life shifted into a new technological age as computers, cell phones, cable television, and digital networking changed the rhythm of the country, while the quarter remained a steady constant. Throughout those transitions, 1995 Washington quarter is therefore more than a simple piece of currency. It is a historical witness, an economic engine, a cultural marker, and a closing chapter of a classic design series, and understanding it fully requires looking not just at the coin itself, but at the era that shaped it, the minting methods that produced it, and the national identity it quietly represents. And when you explore these layers, you uncover a deep narrative filled with craftsmanship, national symbolism, economic context, and evolving collector interest.